when they were going on and they introduced Hulk Hogan, into TNA, I thought, okay, that's going to bring some momentum behind it. That's got some steam. And then Eric Bischoff followed, and I was like, okay, so Eric Bischoff's there now as well. So they've got name power and they've got a creative genius to actually pull something radical off. And maybe this could be the start of something of a great alternative. Not rivalry, but an alternative indie kind of thing, like a bit like the following that ECW had. I thought maybe it could gather some momentum like that, but that really didn't pan out too well. But that was the only time I can think of.
Yeah, no, totally. The time I'm trying to think of in particular, Matt, was, listen, when TNA were on Spike, which you've got to remember, that was WWE's old network channel, which back then was called, I think it was, what was that, TNT? TNN, in fact, TNN. They then changed their name to Spike. When WWE chose to go back to the USA Network, Spike were fuming with WWE. Like, they had no time for WWE, so they quickly picked up TNA. And they were doing some decent draws. It wasn't great against the WWE, but I tell you what, it's now looking at it. They garnered a 1.2 rating, which is just behind SmackDown is currently now. So that's how good they were at one time. That was like a massive deal. Where the hell has it gone wrong since then? To have gone to two different networks after. Personally, I think TNA, they didn't know what they had when they were on Spike. Like, they should have done. I think they've done some bad business bringing people like Hogan in and Bischoff and all the rest of it. I'm not sure they needed that. Like, why didn't they just find somebody? Like, how many people did they go through? Like Russo and Jim Cornette. Like, honestly, the amount of changing around. I've always said that about TNA. They changed direction way too much. But to at one point of been garnering like 1.2 is incredible compared to where they are now. They can just about get 300,000. So it's a crazy decline, but then you're on a completely different network. But you've got to remember, Spike was fully behind TNA at one point. They had no time for WWE when WWE went back to USA, so it was a perfect time for TNA to be big, and they were on the Monday night as well, Matt, you'll remember, live up against Raw. It was the first thing we'd seen since WCW, that was happening. And people were interested in seeing it, but like I said, not enough creative juices going on to keep people there, unfortunately. But yeah, there was a time where I did feel they were a threat, but that's going back a long time ago now, isn't it, really, in general, for all that. So, yeah, for me, they were a threat one time. Now, maybe not so much, obviously. I don't think we'll ever get back to that. Next question, Matt. We have a question from Joel. Did either of you catch Henderson versus Bisping? I'm interested to know your thoughts on UFC versus WWE in 2016, because myself, I've turned to UFC for my new fix. It's not that it's not a work, it's because there's always more stakes on the line of each show, and it seems WWE, being the wrestling show, should have the advantage because they can give off the payoff endings, whereas UFC can't guarantee it. Your thoughts? So that's an interesting point. And Matt, I do believe you did see the match, because I think you saw the match anyway. I'm guessing. Cause
I saw it.
Yeah. It was a fantastic fight. First and foremost, it was really good. And to touch on the whole year, I think UFC's been solid all year. I've not seen one bad card. Really, or like a decent match on one of them where I thought, wow, that was actually really worth watching. In the UK, we're really fortunate. If you've got BT, we kind of get it for free. I'm not sure how I'd feel about paying pay-per-views, but man, pay-per-views for UFC this year, they are off the chain. McGregor, Diaz, both fights, big money. UFC 100, huge money. CM Punk's influence, apparently the buy rates went up massively. So they're doing very, very well. And of course, they got that big sale this year of, $4 billion? So they've had a good year. They've had a good year.
Yeah.
Matt, what's your thoughts on sort of comparing WWE and UFC, and can you really compare the two?
I'm not so sure you can. I mean, the reason UFC is doing so well is I know like it's run very well for sure. But on the other hand, it just keeps improving because the awareness of it goes up, and then more fighters aspire to be UFC fighters, and then they train hard. And essentially what you're getting at the UFC is you're getting the best in the world. These fighters are the best in the world. But no, they're doing this because they want to be recognised as the best in the world, and they're going to go out there and showcase those skills. These are not just like anybody's, and they're gonna throw hands like champs, because that's essentially what they're working towards. And UFC's got really good at picking fights, like fighters that can finish fights now as well. I've noticed that so much more, that a lot of fights now, more than ever, seem to be finished, and that's what excites fans. They want to see matches like that. They want to see people standing up, throwing hands, and if it goes to the ground, they want to see people with skills that got to take it to the ground and actually keep it interesting. I've seen that kind of evolution, and that's had a huge impact.
Yeah.
But as you're going about the whole WWE having the ability to choose the way their match is going, sometimes it's not a benefit. Sometimes it is a complete hindrance. When there's a surprise title change on UFC, it's just that. It's a surprise. It gets people talking. But WWE has a tendency to try and, if someone's won the title, you're not going to see them drop it all that soon, unless there's other circumstances that can't be helped. But usually once they've picked a guy, they're going to run with him for a bit, so you kind of fall into that predictability.
No, I totally agree. And listen, UFC overall, like I said, they've had a great year, and they still got the Madison Square Garden show, which is going to be a big deal, because of course it's the first, I believe the first mixed martial arts event since they've been legalized in New York. So that is like massive, really for UFC to get in New York. That's like a huge market to get into. So they're going from strength to strength. I think there's always been a good crossover between UFC and WWE. There always is going to be that, because, quite frankly, it's. I think the fans are kind of the same sort of genre. I think the problem is, Matt, is that the UFC fans, the WWE fans are maybe in their teens will probably cross the UFC for a little bit more edge, because of the PG era that we're going into. It's hard to sustain anything like that, really. But but you shouldn't really compare them as a threat to each other. I think when you see Brock Lesnar crossing over this year, there's good business relations between the two, and I think if done properly, they can really work well together. Like I say, great year, and it was a great fight on Saturday. Really enjoyed it. Last two questions, Matt. What do we got? We got Mad Mike. It's an interesting name. I hope he's not too mad. I don't know how you both do it each week, talking about WWE. Honestly, WWE has been so below par this past few years. I wanted to know, as fans of wrestling, are you still big fans of WWE? It's almost like we're getting sympathy here, isn't it, for doing this every week? Listen, Mad Mike, I'm not going to lie, there have been times where I'm sure Matt is the same as well, at least I'm thinking he's the same. I'm talking for him here. But there's been times where I've come away from watching WWE where I've been like, that was a total load of rubbish. There's definitely been times of that, and don't get me wrong, there's been many times where that's happened through history. But overall, I'm always going to be a loyal fan to WWE, because it's just something I've watched for so long. Do I think this is the best time that WWE has had in its history? Absolutely not. I think it's probably one of the most flattest times, which is a shame, because my podcast has been up in all this. But there's always reason to talk about WWE. I mean, that's why we have it on the show. It is the show that everyone wants to hear about. So we know whether it's going bad or whatever, people like to talk about it. So But don't get me wrong, as a wrestling fan, like I said before, I watch New Japan, I watch Ring of Honor, and I can get a fix from those things. If I don't always enjoy the product, but here's one of the things that's come along in the last couple of years that I do enjoy, which is NXT, which thankfully does get me by most times with the wrestling side of it. Anyway, Matt, how do you feel about that? Us talking about it every week. Sometimes, have you ever come on where you felt like, oh my goodness, not again?
Well, it's happened all the time throughout. All the time that I've been watching it, there's always been ups and downs, and there's always been something that I like about the show and something I dislike about the show. I'll happily sit through the bits that make me swear at the TV and whatever, and shout at it and whatever, and then the next segment will come on, and then Jericho will tell us about it. And then I laugh, So, as long as there's something to be engaged in, like even if you sit through a terrible match and then you sit through a good match, I'll always balance it out and I'll always look at the positives, because there's something about wrestling that really draws me in. I do enjoy it. I do like to watch it. I do like to talk about it. And like I said, if you watch a terrible episode of Raw or SmackDown, Ring of Honor, I think Ring of Honor is guaranteed to put on a great show, wrestling-wise. So you can always just switch the channel, put on Ring of Honor, and you'll be satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally agree. We are only human, but totally agree with that. Let's take our last question then, Matt. It's from Jennifer from Cleveland. What have we got? Last night, the women's match between Nikki Bella and Naomi seemed like a throwback. Your thoughts, please. Also, I'm visiting London in December. Any good tips or places to visit or do? I didn't know you were travel agents as well.
Well, if she was coming in November, I would have said WWE's here. You could have seen that.
Yeah, follow them over. See them in the UK crowd. We're a bit different here. As far as places go, I mean, listen, we live close to London, but I'm not an expert by knowing what's going on. But look, we've got the London Eye, Houses of Parliament. I'm sure interesting maybe to you. Buckingham Palace. Those. The good thing with London is our underground. Probably everyone says that when they come from America, is the underground system is really easy to use. You might see the map for the first time and think, oh my goodness, but actually it's very, very easy to use, and you can get around very easy on the underground. So that would be my first plug to you, and also get a bus, because they're as cheap as chips, as we say in this country. Very cheap in London, hardly cost you anything to get around. So yeah, loads of the good thing with London, Matt, is it's all on your doorstep as well. As we found out when we went to New York, it wasn't quite the same with the travel situation when we were walking around countless blocks to get anywhere.
Well, we might think our buses are reasonable, but if you're in America, and you can get around on $2 or whatever, you get in and you might be in for a bit of a shock, But,
I mean, compared to anywhere else, it's still a pretty decent deal. I mean, obviously. It is all pretty much on your it's pretty much on your doorstep in London. It's not too many places you wouldn't get to. So as far as the match last night, Matt, was it a bit of a throwback between Nikki Bella and Naomi?
I have been a little bit worried about the SmackDown's direction. I did kind of think the other day when I was watching, SmackDown, I was thinking, well, okay, the women's revolution is well and truly kicked off on Raw. I'm seeing like Charlotte doing corkscrew moonsaults off the top and everything, and it's crazy. And then I'm looking at SmackDown and I'm thinking, well, this is kind of a bit stale, isn't it? Like they've just sort of shipped off Becky over there and gone, come on, Becky, revitalise this division on your own. They've got to inspire the rest of them. They've got to try new things. I think Nikki, she's going to be branded a little bit like in a bad way, because she was last time she was champion. She was kind of like a divas champion. Mm-hmm. But they've got to change it and modernise it a bit more on SmackDown, because I'm not really seeing too much different from what they used to do. And it's kind of sad, because I want it to all move forwards. But this is where it comes back to what you said before. Like Bayley would have been perfect on SmackDown. That could have saved it.
Yeah. It does feel like they're going a different way on SmackDown. I'm hoping it's just a one-off, but I get where Matt's coming from. on that one, quite frankly. So, yeah, hopefully not, but, we'll see what comes. But, yes, do tell us, Jennifer, when you're in London, send us an email in and we'll give you a shout out, let us know where you've been, for sure. Great. Thank you to everyone that sent in all your questions.